Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My questions through you, sir, will be to the CEO of RBC, Mr. McKay. Mr. McKay, I'm going to put a series of questions to you. It might feel like it's in a bit of a rapid-fire way. If I do reclaim my time, for example, interrupt you to reclaim my time, it's not personal. I just want to make sure that I have a chance to ask all the questions. So, Mr. McKay, as Canada's top fossil fuel bank, RBC disclosed a bombshell data point a few months ago that RBC's emissions from financing oil and gas companies are equal to the emissions from all cars, light trucks in Canada every year. This is a shocking amount of pollution that a single company, RBC, finances and is responsible for every year. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. McKay, what are you doing to cut this in half over the next 6 years, as scientists say must happen to avoid more fires and floods?
Thank you for that question. Mr. Chair, my last name is pronounced Mackay, not McKay. It's just for...
You know what? I asked the clerk. I suspected that.
Mr. Chair, I want my time.
Yeah,
I don't want any interruptions.
You're going to get your time. So
okay.
Don't worry. Okay, go ahead,
Mr. Mackay, please answer the question.
Yeah.
So as we talk about, I mean, I can't reconcile any of the numbers that you mentioned, but as you think about the journey that we're on in a complex journey, it's important that we made a $15 billion commitment to investing in renewables. That's going to make a
you said that in your opening remarks. Mr. Mackay, RBC is under investigation right now by the Competition Bureau of Canada for misleading customers by touting its climate record, as you've done in your opening remarks, while continuing to be one of the largest financiers of fossil fuels in the world. So how do you reconcile that? How do you reconcile that to the customers who you sell this greenwashed messaging to, who feel misled?
There was one complaint from an individual to the Competition Bureau. The Competition Bureau did a full review, and we've not heard anything from that whatsoever.
On the questions of ethics, Mr. Mackay, Canadian banks are still financing an expansion of fossil fuels, which goes against our need for clean energy transition. Last year, your company listed 4th. Scotiabank was 6th in the top 10 banks around the world financing fossil fuel expansion, new oil and gas pipelines and power plants that lock in new emissions for decades to come. When will you stop greenwashing and doublespeak with climate plans when really you're the companies pouring fuel on the fire?
I respectfully disagree with your points. We are a big part of the solution. You've seen the commitments we've made to transition financing. You've seen the transparency that we have within the emissions that we have from our core sectors, whether it's automotive, transportation, energy, manufacturing. We're very clear on the emissions that are coming from our lending portfolio. We've made commitments to reduce those by 2030 and to net zero. We've made commitments to reduce for clients.
Okay, Mr. Mackay, in 2021,
I think
I'm satisfied with your response. In 2021, the Queen's Finance Association hosts an event called Road to CEO, featuring you, sir. At the start of the appearance, in relationship to RBC's financing of fossil fuels, you said, and I quote, "I have not had one prime minister, one cabinet member, not one single elected official has called me and said, 'Dave, why are you doing this?' You'd think that if we were doing something wrong, if we were financing something we shouldn't be, someone in the Liberal government would have called and said, 'Dave, why are you doing this?' You said, and I quote, 'In fact, they call me and say, you have to finance the transition.' So who in this Liberal government has called you and asked you to finance oil and gas sector?"
The energy sector is a big part of the Canadian economy. And as I said in my remarks, this is a transition. This is a complex transition. We are not getting off fossil-based fuels immediately. Just stop is just not an option for us. We have to commit to finding greener sources of energy. We have to accelerate that transition. There is an anxiety in the country about making this transition. And therefore, Canada has to move and keep moving forward. So
Mr. Mackay, I'm going to ask you directly, sir, as an elected official, I'm going to ask you directly, why are you financing the expansion of the oil and gas sector when we know that we have climate targets that are rapidly approaching beyond a place from which there's no return, sir?
We're financing the transition. Energy is still a big part of the Canadian economy, and therefore we have to continue to support the economy as we make the transition. You have to do both. You can't just do one.
So if
And
we're talking
therefore,
about a
we're
balanced
focused on
approach,
emissions,
sir,
we're focused on reducing.
can you please provide me with the amount at which you finance oil and gas versus which you finance the transition? Let's just compare those two numbers.
I don't have that number in front of me. I can tell you we made a $15 billion commitment to the transition. We made a $500
But you don't know how much you have in oil and
commitment
gas?
to sustainable funds. I financed $400 billion of that $500 billion commitment to sustainable finance, sustainable transition. So
Yeah, I'm sorry,
I don't have the number
Mr.
on
Chair,
top of my head because
the double speak sometimes obfuscates what I'm trying to ask, so I'm going to ask it very directly. Is it your testimony here today that you have donated, or you have donated, kind of, that you have put $400 billion in oil and gas and $15 billion in the transition? Is that the scale of magnitude that we're talking about here?
No, $400 billion I referred to was sustainable financing across a number of initiatives. So I was trying to explain before you cut me off that we finance a number of transition initiatives from equity.
But you don't know your total
small business
holdings in oil
entrepreneurs.
and gas. You don't have that as a CEO. You don't know that.
I can get you for that. No, I don't have it on top of my head because it breaks down by different sector, different countries, different regions, different capabilities. So we can get that for you.
Thank
It's in
you.
our disclosure, so you could look it up as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Mackay, would you be able to send that to the committee in writing? Those numbers that
Sure.
you mentioned
Absolutely.
that you have. Thank
To
you.
be clear, the request was for our financing from.
Well, I'll ask
fossil
Mr. Green. Could you be clear on the request?
Well, I want it comparable. He's touting the $15 billion that he says.
No, I just want to know what is it you're looking from him.
The total investments in oil and gas sector. It's a
Okay,
very
total
straightforward
investments
question.
in oil and gas. If you could get that to us, that would be
Very
great.
straightforward.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Mackay, following up on that, you stated your company released the client engagement approach on climate, and it stated that it is prepared, RBC is prepared to make difficult business decisions and ultimately step away if a client, after repeated engagement, does not demonstrate sufficient planning for an energy transition. In your previous answer, you said 80% of your oil and gas investments do. What have you done with the other 20%? Have you stopped providing financing to any oil and gas clients?
We have definitely exited relationships around the world. It is overall part of our risk strategy. As far as your question on the 20%, we're actively working with them, and we have set targets around moving that 80% number towards 100%. This is a 30-year journey. So we're on that way.
We
We're working with
don't
clients.
have 30 years,
and
Mr.
clients.
Mackay. I would state to you, sir, that yesterday, 4 seniors from Elders for Climate Sanity had their day in court because back in April, 4 of them, including 98-year-old Gail Lormer, were dragged out of a Hamilton area RBC branch for stating the obvious that RBC, as one of the #1 contributors to oil and gas financing, is not only greenwashing their communications, but actively investing in the ecological demise of our country. I want to know, to 98-year-old Gail Lormer, what message do you have from her in terms of the inherent contradictions between what you're saying here at committee and what you advertise to the public versus what is actually transpiring with the hundreds of billions of dollars you invest in oil and gas?
What is actually transpiring is that we're working with our clients to help them reduce their emissions. We're helping finance that transition. We're making unprecedented commitments to investing in Canadian renewable energy. We're making unprecedented commitment and executing on investing in equity and new solutions. We made an unprecedented first commitment to $500 billion in sustainable finance, which we've already financed $400 billion. We are working with our clients.
Canadian
Make this
banks, including the
for
RBC,
everybody.
financed $2 billion to the oil sands activities. When you look at all the land acknowledgements that all of you have done here today, First Nations and Métis Nations in Northern Alberta and Northwest Territories have been outspoken about the fact that the oil sands activities are poisoning their waters, causing high cancer rates, and these nations aren't getting any of the benefits. So is it fair to these nations that are opposed to the expansion of the oil sands that you continuously pump billions of dollars into this highly polluting sector?
I mean, it's
When you
I think
think
a bit of
about
we have, very briefly, please, Mr. Mackay, please.
We are working with First Nations across the country. Many First Nations are equity participants in energy projects, including pipelines across Canada. It's a big part of reconciliation
Thank you.
in our country to allow our First Nations to participate, and they're a big part of the solution.
Thank
in
you.
our
We'll go to
energy
Mr. Cram now.
transition. And they are
We'll
participating.
go to Mr. Cram.
Okay, thank you.
Distribution to the members, it will be appreciated.
Mr. Mackay, several reports, including one by the Centre for the Future of Work dated December 2022, have confirmed that inflation in Canada is driven by profits in a few sectors. Oil and gas top that list. Do you know what sector number 2 is? Mr. Mackay?
Yeah, sorry, no, I'm not familiar with the report you're referencing.
The second one was banking, sir. So as Canadians struggle to make ends meet, paying for higher mortgages and higher gas prices driving up inflations, their earnings are padding the corporate profits of fossil fuel companies and banks like RBC, which you also invest and profit from. So what do you have to say to workers that you're personally benefiting from a double whammy of investing in oil and gas and higher interest rates on mortgages?
We are very concerned about the overall impact on Canadians from higher interest rates. We're working with Canadians on their mortgages. As you know, mortgage rates are set by the market at the end of the day and bond pricing.
Mr. Mackay, do you know the average salary of a Canadian here in Ontario in your home province?
Canadians to help them continue to manage.
I'm satisfied with his answer.
Mr. Mackay, it goes back to Mr.
Do you know what
Greenwood.
the average salary is of a Canadian here in Ontario, sir?
Average household income or average
No,
salary?
salary. $94,000, sir, roughly. $94,153. Sir, in 2023, we had the hottest year on record. How much money did you make?
2023. I don't recall the exact number.
$15.22
I'm not sure what your
million,
question is.
sir.
Okay.
So in 2024, your board has approved a pay raise of 12%, which means you'll be bringing in $17 million. You're profiting from both high inflation on oil and gas and mortgages as a direct compensation. So does your bonus package include the performances in the oil and gas sector? Yes or no?
My compensation is set by the board and includes a number of publicly disclosed targets, financial targets, strategic targets, climate targets. 10% of my does not include any specific reference to oil and gas.
So it has your climate target. So how much did your climate target metric in the last fiscal year include in your bonuses? Have you met those targets?
We have met those targets, yes, given the strong performance we've had in helping influence policy, Climate Institute, the renewables programs, the $400 billion in sustainable financing we put out there, the leadership we've shown in policy. Yes, we did meet our targets in 2020.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.